right. So let's get to the next slide here. Great. So from the time that we were hunters and gatherers until the time that we found out that we could create apps that would allow us to sit on our couch and order pizza in our underwear, human beings have always been preoccupied with the future of food. And rightly so. I mean, we depend on this for our existence. This is a human need. And so this kind of fascination with the future has been a breeding ground for fantastical visions and fantasies what we will eat tomorrow, in 20 years' time, and also 100 years from now. So in 1962, the futuristic illustrator Arthur Rodenbach, he actually made this prediction of how we would be farming in the future. And he predicted that we would be producing larger-than-life vegetables with gamma-ray sprinklers in highly industrialized context in the United States. And I can tell you, he's not that far off. And of course, it's easy to laugh at this, but these kinds of predictions that we make about the future influence the actions that we take towards the future. And I have to say that with this comes a huge amount of responsibility. Especially if we want to move away from this kind of default future that's so easy to fall into. And so I just want to test the audience here. Who thinks the future is grim, dark, and bleak? So put up your hand. So we've got a couple of people here, yeah? And who thinks that the future is full of fantastic opportunities and is bright? Okay, I'm with you guys. Well, okay, let me tell you a bit of a spoiler, is that there's no one future. There are multiple futures. And in contexts where there's large disparity between the rich and the poor, we often see multiple futures playing out in the same cities and the same countries. So if we fast forward to 65 years, from 1962 to 2017, we find a really interesting exercise that was carried out by the World Economic Forum. And these were scenarios that were made to provoke and to question the assumptions that we have about the future of food. So in a global world, we know that we can be, in an agriculture and food context, we know that we can be highly global and at the same time be very much local in our ideas. Just think about how mobile phone technology has changed the food systems and has changed the way that small-scale farmers interact with agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa. And so we can also see that we can affect or be affected by varying levels of resource efficiency or inefficiency. And in a resource-constrained world, it's often the small-scale farmers that get hit the most when we use resources inefficiently. And so I want to say that I'm a stubborn optimist, and I believe in desirable, healthy, and sustainable food futures. And I want to show you some of the work that I've been doing around the world. So for the last 6 years, I have been looking towards the past in order to understand the future. When I was working for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, I was working on a project related to edible insects and valorizing these kinds of foods, which are often called future foods. And many people laughed at the work that we were doing and thought it was a joke. But actually, we wrote a report that is the most downloaded report of the organization. We've had over 12 million downloads. And so there are more people taking this seriously now. But it's interesting because foods like edible insects, different kinds of species, these are often called traditional, forgotten, undervalued, or my favorite, vintage foods. That one came up recently. These kind of crops or livestock, the potential is huge, okay? And I think that we can greatly improve on the ways that we grow, the way we harvest, the way we process, the way we market these foods and products, both now and in the future. So I'll give you another example from Thailand, where I've been working as well. So 10 years ago, no one would have ever imagined that crickets, which is a popular food in the poorest region of Thailand, the northeastern part, no one would have ever imagined that that kind of food would become a popular street food amongst the urban elite in Bangkok. And we've seen that forgotten foods or vintage foods are on the comeback. So I'd like to put it out there and say that, yes, we can certainly invest in the development of technologies like, culturing meat and making it affordable. But I'd like to challenge you and ask you that why don't we also put our efforts into improving on the foods and the systems that we already have? It's so easy to sit in a boardroom thousands of kilometers away and imagine what this Tanzanian farmer's life how it would be better and how we could make it better. But really, would it be transformative? Would it be long-term? And in parentheses, have you even talked to her? Throughout my research, I've had the great pleasure of working very, very closely with small-scale farmers. And as a part of the Green Insect Research Project, we were looking at the potential of edible insects, or insects for food and feed, in establishing green economy in Kenya. And this was a Kenyan-Danish, very international research partnership. And so we were mostly looking at improving on the technology to rear insects for food and feed. But I believe that that research project was actually highly successful over a 4-year time span, so in the funding cycle. Not only because we looked at improving the technology itself, which would of course benefited farmers, but, and this is something that hasn't come up so much today yet, is that we made a large effort to actually affect policy and to get politicians in Kenya to start thinking about the future of food and how insects could be part of that. And at the same time, what we were doing is we were facilitating a technology transfer from northeastern Thailand, where cricket farming technology has been developed 20 years ago. And we facilitated that transfer to Western Kenya. So we didn't take an idea from north to south, we took an idea from south to south. And of course, we adapted it to the context. So I've unfortunately seen what the effects are of inappropriate technologies, and I've seen what that can do to rural communities. It causes fatigue, it can make farmers more risk-averse, and it wastes time, money, and energy for the recipients, so the farmers, and also the donors themselves. Another thing that we need to consider is the entire system. And, another thing that we need to consider is the entire system. So the food system is made up of a complex web of processes and infrastructure that is involved in feeding a given population. It's influenced by social, by political, economic, cultural, and environmental contexts. So when we make a decision here, it's going to have knock-on effects in other parts of the system. So I just want to do a little visualization exercise with you all. And I'm going to get you to just think for about 5 seconds. It's not a very long time. But I want you to think about the context that you're working in, okay? And think about what kind of technologies would be appropriate there. And I want you to think about it in terms of agriculture and food. And you might say to me, Afton, we're not working in that sector. But all of us eat, okay? And so the decisions that are made about the future of food will affect us in one way or another. Okay, so let's all stop. I'm going to do it too. So let's stop for 5 seconds here and just think, okay? Think about the things that I've told you. Go. Okay, hopefully some ideas came into your heads. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, all right, because I think that's not very nice. But I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've been thinking about. So the first person that comes to my mind is an interaction with technology, is one of the urban farmers that I was working with in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And her name is Mama Maria. And technology has played a role in her life, but it's not high-tech technology, it's simply having a smartphone. And how it's changed for her is that by connecting with other urban farmers in her network who are further distance away, people who she could not visit, she's been able to connect with them over social media and basically formulate groups of farmers who are able to advocate for their rights and the right to the land in the city. These farmers are extremely important in Dar es Salaam because they're cultivating 60% of the leafy green vegetables that are consumed in the city. And without that, it would be a missing element and a missing contribution to food security. So I'm also thinking about another person, and this is my friend Eden. Okay, and she works for Appeal Sciences. This company is doing really interesting things. They've created a kind of natural peel, basically, that you can add to fruits and vegetables to extend their shelf life. And this is going to have huge impacts, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, where getting fruit and veg from the producer to perhaps an urban hub can take sometimes days, and by that time, a lot of those fruits and vegetables are ruined. So if we can address the food waste issue, we can also feed more people. Not an extremely high-tech solution, but a very, very interesting one. And I'm also thinking of a company that I've been working with in South Africa in December, and they're called Agra Protein. And Agra Protein is really interesting because what they're doing is they've created technology to rear the larvae of the black soldier fly. And they're using this for fish feed and for poultry feed. And they're situated in one of the poorest and most dangerous parts of Cape Town. And they basically are, have decided, made an effort to put their factory in this area so that and made a decision not to automize, okay? A lot of people are talking about automation, but this company decided, no, we don't want to automize. Maybe in other factories in other parts of the world, but not here, because they've given jobs to over 100 people in the community, and they've addressed a small part of the unemployment rate there. So these are all examples of the choices, how the choices that we make are influencing and facilitating, basically, the improvements along the food system. And so each one of you is representing different realities. So I think it would be wrong of me to come here today and talk about recipes and basically telling you what you should do. Perhaps we can talk about that later. But what I can tell you is there's a lot of potential here, a lot of unrealized potential. We can see that the food and agriculture sectors have been very, very slow to harness the power of recently disruptive technologies, and they've attracted significantly less and lower levels of investment capital, and they've inspired fewer technology startups in other sectors. So I hope that you can fix that. So at a recent conference on human-centered tech in Copenhagen, and I just say in parentheses that you should Google Copenhagen Catalog, their new principles on human-centered technology. It just came out 2 weeks ago, very, very interesting. So at this conference, one of the delegates said that before proceeding with any kind of new technology, we should ask a 7-year-old what they think about it, and we should also ask a 70-year-old. And then we can see how what their opinions are. And I think that in terms of food, we also need to look at the systems level, but then also the human level once again. And so whenever I'm making a decision about things that could affect the lives of other people, I'm asking myself 4 questions. Who will this technology benefit most? What are the trade-offs and the unintended consequences? Is it inclusive? And is this what we need right now? Or are there other things that are that we need to address before we implement this technology? Because in the end, it's up to us to choose the default future, the easy choice, or to choose the one that is healthy, sustainable, and human-centered. Thank you very much.